So I'm here with Christopher Schulz of Pinups magazine. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I want you to tell people listening to this what about your magazine.
Okay.
Describe it.
Okay. So the simplest way describe it is it's sort of the concept of the Playboy centerfold, but expanded over every single page.
Okay.
So every page is an image. There's no text or anything like that, and everything's full bleed. And you can take the binding apart and tile the loose pages to reveal a giant image. Um, so it's in a way it's a giant puzzle. But it's interesting because I think it kind of plays with the book form, and it's pretty loyal to printed material.
Okay. And tell me about the subject matter that describe the subject matter
Oh
that
yeah,
you
so of course, yeah. So
photograph.
the subject matter is all male nudes. So it's a queer publication, and mostly they're shot in well, various places. Sometimes in someone's home or artist studio or out in nature. But it's all black and white. Everything's printed black and white, offset printing. Um, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for describing that. So I discovered pinups, I think in 2009. I don't know how I found it because I don't even think Instagram was out. Um,
MySpace maybe.
no, it wouldn't have been MySpace, but I thought it was awesome. Like as soon as I saw it, I thought it was amazing. I ordered a couple of issues, and first of all, the men that you photograph are just really beautiful. It's like really sexy, but it's not like porno. It's just very sexy and cute and fun. And I mean, that's how I thought it was. And then also the fact that, as you describe, you can pull the staples out, and then you can assemble it into this giant poster that's like 3 feet by 6 feet. So you become part of the magazine almost. Like you're suddenly engaged in the product that you just purchased in a way that you normally wouldn't get in a standard magazine. And because it's so large, like you have to put it on the floor to
Yeah.
assemble it. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like this physical experience. And I remember one of the first times we assembled it is I think it was 2009, 2010, and I was part of the New England gay snowboarding club. And so we had like a ski house in Stowe, Vermont, and I brought my pinups, and we assembled them as like all of this house full of gay guys,
Oh, I
and we
love it.
just had so much fun doing it. And I think that's when I emailed you just to let you know how much fun it was.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. I love to hear that. It's funny because for me, I'm like I've assembled them so many times for exhibitions. So when I do it, I'm like, oh, I have to put another one together.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fun.
So where did you come up with the idea, and when did it start?
I had a number of things that kind of culminated in the idea. I used to when I moved to New York from Chicago. Um, in my early 20s, and at the time I was interning at Printed Matter, so I was exposed to a lot of artist books, and I was really sort of into this sort of indie, self-published work.
And
And
printed matter is what?
oh, I'm sorry, Printed Matter is an organization a nonprofit organization based in New York. They've been around since the early 70s, and they specialize in artist books, and they also produce the sort of famous Printed Matter New York, LA, and New York art book fairs that happen every year. So that was sort of like an early New York lifeline for me in my creative world, and it was really inspiring. And I think being exposed to a lot of these books was very inspiring. And so there was that component, but then also separately, I was very into looking at and trying to uncover older queer publications that were sort of outside of my, like, definitely not part of my generation or anything like that, like early pre-AIDS publications,
Like like
like
like
Straight to Hell. Yeah.
like like magazines or newspapers or everything?
Yeah, well, like yeah, like you magazines, but like also self-published. Like Straight to Hell was a the Manhattan Review of Unnatural Acts, I think is the full
What was
name, but
that? What was that?
it was published by Boyd McDonald, and I think I want to say it began in the '60s, or I think it was mostly ran through the '70s under his creation. But he was in New York and publishing, self-publishing, printing, collating at home, and like kind of doing what I do with Pinup, self-distributing. And it's sort of legendary now, this sort of legendary queer zine that was the basis and inspiration for Butt magazine. Um, and I was exposed to Butt magazine when I was still in Chicago, and that was also an early um, publication that meant a lot to me early on, that got me interested in looking at some of the older publications that came before it, and kind of wondering, like, why isn't there more of this for my generation?
Yeah. So
Where did all the cool queer publications go? And
yeah,
so that's kind of,
was this stuff that you're describing? Was it both text and imagery? Was it
yeah, well,
articles? I know Bud is articles and imagery.
yeah. Straight to Hell was more like people would send in personal sex stories, and then they would be published alongside kind of like stock photography of like pornographic gay sex,
Hmm.
or I don't know if maybe the images were actually also submitted, but they were never really like connected. Like the story and the image weren't necessarily
Right.
didn't go together. But it was this really nice, cool, weird publication um, that I think inspired a lot of later queer publications.
And what's so interesting about that is so important for gay people. So what was this, like the 70s?
Predominantly, yeah,
Okay.
and it continues. I think even now with I don't. Billy Miller is now sort of the publisher, and I don't think he's published a new issue in quite some time. But it's still kind of like still around in other forms.
I guess what I'm getting at is in the 70s, if you're a man interested in men and you're
Mm,
living in the middle of the country, there's nothing. So these magazines, they had so much value to them. It
yeah,
was the only exposure
yeah.
to, to gay erotica, potentially. I mean, if you're living in Kansas in 1972, I don't even know if you can get um, porn, gay porn. I don't even know if it would have been in a movie theater back then.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, in print at least, I'm sure everything was mail order.
Okay, so this stuff was mail order that
Yeah,
you're describing?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very DIY. You know, like you
Okay.
self-publish, and yeah. So that was definitely like one thing I was also looking at the time, and then separately, I started to just think about large scale format in like weird ways. Like was really inspired by in the background of this one gay bar scene in Fox and His Friends from this like '75. There's this like beefcake, this poster of this like beefcake guy that looked maybe like life size, and I was interested in that. And then I was interested in um, After Dark magazine from the '70s had these like really great ads in the back, and one of them was a beach towel with like a beefcake on it. And so that was another bit of inspiration, where I was seeing these kind of like larger scale images
Yep.
that seemed really cool. And I thought, that imagine if like a magazine, like the centerfold was that big. And I think there was even a publication in Print and Matter that took this idea of one image across every page, where each page individually is abstract, and this one you didn't take apart and reassemble it. It was more conceptual, that you know here's a giant image, but you'll never really see it.
Yeah.
Whereas with mine, it's meant to be disassembled and then reassembled as a poster. And in a way, what's interesting about that, and what's unique about that, is it speaks so specifically to the printed form. Because people sometimes reach out to me and they say, hey, is your magazine ever going to be available electronically for like as a PDF download? I'm like, no, of course not. Like you lose all that concept, and that what you were talking about, that physicality of experiencing, taking it apart, putting it together. And like, that's all, like, that's the meat of the concept to me.
Yeah.
So that goes out the door once it's not on paper anymore, you know.
Yeah. So do you have it sounds like you have an affinity for printed material in general.
Yeah, big time.
Okay, so tell me about that. I mean, obviously, I expressed my experience with, um, assembling the poster, also being able to hold it in your hands. There's something about that. But tell me what your thoughts are on that topic.
I mean, I've always been into print, but I think it might have to do with that, I was a kid of the 80s and print was dominant, and like all digital was AOL chat rooms, so my experience of like culture came from magazines, printed material, album graphic design, like album art. That was my go-to, and that was sort of something that I always kind of fantasized about engaging with, as a creator. I'm like, oh, I want to make, I would make like cassette tapes so that I could design the J cards. So
Okay.
that's always been sort of a deep passion for me since I was very young. And so that still to this day runs through. Um, yeah, I mean, print has always been really important to me.
Yeah. There's something about, you mentioned album covers, and
Yeah,
that was such a big deal when a new record was released when I was a kid. It was the album that you would get and
yeah,
what was on the album cover. And then you had the sleeve.
yeah,
Lyric, does it have lyrics? Does it not have lyrics? Sometimes there was a fold out, and that
yeah,
was
yeah,
like this big bonus.
yeah,
And that was a really big part of the experience. And this is before music videos. I mean, that's how old I am. So but it was very much about being in your bedroom with your friends, listening to records and looking at the physical printed matter.
yeah. It was funny that you say that because there was actually a particular issue of Pinups where I kind of did a nod to that old format, where we did this. The scene was the model was listening to records on a turntable and dancing around
Totally.
the house naked, and I was more about like that kind of like the ritual of that format where you have to physically flip the record and
Yeah.
all that. So I was definitely tapping into that, through my love of print and it being kind of like an older format, but that's still celebrated and has its own, brings its own rituals to the table. There are things that are unique to print or unique to the vinyl format that you don't get with other formats. And yeah, I mean, I love all that stuff.
So I know I have the edition with the guy in his apartment with the records,
Uh-huh.
and that's super cute. So let's talk about your models. So and I have a story about one of your models.
Oh yeah.
So tell me about where do you find these guys?
It ranges, but mostly they're friends of mine. I mean,
Okay.
when I started making the magazine, I was pretty young. I was like in my mid-20s, and I didn't. All I had was like my social circle, and so it was people I knew. Someone I was dating at the time, or just a good friend, or I mean, or someone and then later on when the magazine became a little bit more known, I was people would reach out to me, and so then I was connecting with other people, but yeah, originally it was just my social circle,
Okay.
but everyone
Yeah,
kind of my age, and
my favorite models are the two guys that are sort of wrestling.
mm,
I thought
that one
they're so cute.
that one was fun. That one was inspired by, are you familiar with Ken Russell's film Women in Love
Mm-mm.
from like 1969? There's this famous scene where Alan Bates and Oliver Reed wrestle naked in front of this like fireplace, and it's really like a show of, I guess, like, I mean, they're friends. It's not a sexual thing, but I was just really interested. It's a sort of really famous scene, and I wanted to kind of recreate it in print. And actually, that location where we shot it was a room at the Chelsea Hotel,
Oh,
which has its
really?
own really cool history. So I was happy about that one, that I can kind of tap in a little to New York City's history, and be part of the history of that hotel.
That sounds like an amazing way to be creative. So not only that you actually get to create these scenarios and sets that you think up and you want to express. So yeah,
Mm.
tell me about that
Yeah,
process of.
yeah, I'm an artist in New York that has no studio. So for me, it's really a matter of like, okay, where can I shoot? Where can I shoot? Uh, friend's house, maybe I'll rent a room at the Chelsea Hotel for the night. And it's really about being in New York through most of it. I mean, I've done some issues where I got to leave town, and that was also like really exciting and motivating to be in a new environment. That was actually really brought a lot more to the table. But working in New York, you're really, and especially since I'm shooting nudes, you have to be in an enclosed space. It's really hard. It's really hard to find, a good location. So you have to be creative. And I'm like, I also don't have a car, so I'm like running around with like my equipment, and it's kind of messy. It's hard and yeah, I'm pretty. I only do the shoots when when I have a project.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think of a concept and then based on what you have access to, um, like how does the idea come from? Like I know you have the desert one, you have the hotel one. There was one I think that was in a cabin.
Yeah. I mean, the concepts come from different places. Sometimes it's like I'll have finished one issue, and thinking about that process will lead me to an idea that pushes me in the direction of the next issue. Um, so there's that part of it, but then also it's just if an opportunity comes up where I'll go to someone's apartment and be like, oh wow, your apartment's incredible. Would you let me shoot here? Or I mean, obviously, I think I might have been reading about the Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea Hotel is just a thing about,
Hmm. Of
and
course.
I just went there and booked a place. But yeah, it kind of depends, like issue to issue. Um, I don't know. I also do them infrequently enough that every time it's a bit fresh when I come to it to be like, oh, I want to do this time.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not pressured to do. It's not like I'm making one every month or quarter. It's it's not very consistent.
Yeah. Are you on a schedule or do you just do them whenever you
Not
feel?
at all. I used to be on a bit of a schedule because I was really committed to always being an exhibitor at the New York Art Book Fair, which was usually in like September, October, like fall time. And that gave me a structure. Like I had a due date,
Yeah.
and
It's always helpful.
then they started doing the book fair in LA. So then I'm like, oh, I have a due date instead of every year. I have it every 6 months, but then I got to the point where I'm like, no, I'm going to do this when I feel like it. And like this year, for example, I didn't produce an issue because of COVID and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like at this point, I think I've done 20 issues of the original series. I'm like, I'm done. At 20, I cut it off. And then I decided, I took some time off from it and then decided to kind of start it up again, but sort of in a new direction. So now I've started this different series called Pinups Artist Series,
Okay.
where instead of doing the photography myself, I mean, the original series is like a one-man, project. I'm
Yep.
doing everything.
Yeah.
But now I've started to tap other people who I admire, who are photographers who work in.
So is that the desert one where the guys are in the cruisy area with
Yeah,
the?
that was the first issue of that one, and I didn't shoot that. It was my friend Patrick Lee in California, who's an incredible artist. He does amazing graphite, hyper realistic graphite drawings,
I saw them.
portraits that are
Yeah.
amazing. And then with his photography work, it's actually mostly landscape. But what got me interested in working with him and kind of switching how Pinups is done is that I was kind of really got in my head about limiting myself for the sake of maintaining a consistency that I felt it was really exciting to break out of that by inviting someone else to produce photos who would come in it from a different perspective, who would have a different approach, who maybe would tap models or like the subject differently than me. Like Patrick's the subjects for his portraits are usually people he just like will go up to on the street and show them his work and be like, I am an artist, here are my drawings, can I
Yeah.
take your photo and do a portrait of you? I would never do that, you know. So he has is
Yeah.
a completely different method
Yeah.
of creating images, and I thought it'd be really exciting to kind of open the door and also to like break my, you know, all of my like the rules that I've set up for myself, you know. Like he came to me and he's like, is it okay if this is a little more sexual than, you know, the usual
Yeah.
pinup stuff? I'm like, yeah, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
That's the point. I want you to make it, you know, do something different than I would do. So he was I did the first issue with Patrick, and that was really, really cool. And
It's
I wasn't even,
incredible. And
I
it has
wasn't even
and it has docking.
I wasn't even there. The stories that came out of that shoot are pretty interesting and crazy, and they kind of come into the magazine at points. Like his car broke down, and the tow truck driver who picked him up was like, "You know what goes on around here, right?"
I thought
And
that was fabricated.
no, that was a real
Oh, that's
quote. That's a real
awesome.
quote. And then there's this at the back cover of the magazine is a picture of his car on the, you know, tow truck. That's all, like that all happened. That's like
Nice.
part of the story of like getting these photos.
Yeah.
I think he went through hell to get these pictures. But
I think it's fantastic. Like I think the end result is wonderful, and I love the one where the guy's laying out and he's on. It's like a sheet or a towel that says USA,
yeah,
and it reminds me of when I was a kid. There was tons of woods around my house, and there was always forts that the teenagers made, where we would always find porn magazines and stuff.
yeah.
But there would always be stuff like that, like blankets and things, and that's what it reminded me of. It
Well,
reminded me of stumbling upon like a place where people would hang out, and who knows what would be going on, but like,
well, that's really where that place is.
yeah,
Apparently, it's in it's near Joshua Tree, not quite in Joshua Tree, California, and it's like this cruising ground. And
yeah,
there's weird stuff everywhere. There's like tires and doll parts and like bare mattresses, and guys cruise in that area. And I think I imagine that blanket he might have brought that, but it also could have been there.
yeah,
So it's kind of like how you describe, where like there's this, you know, it has this sort of like fingerprint of like activity.
yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely got that
Yeah.
from that edition.
Like at the
Uh,
very last page, there's a guy walking in the distance and he's got a shirt and no pants. And that guy was just there.
oh, I assume that was one of the models or something.
No,
I got to relook at this then.
it's a really cool issue.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And then
So
the one after was with Paul Sepoya and Dorian Wood, which was also super fun.
So I haven't seen. I'll have to check that one out. I haven't
Yeah.
seen that. So one of my favorite ones was the summer of 2010. I had a place in P Town all
Hmm.
summer, and I had one of your pinups assembled on the kitchen wall, and it was the one where the guy's brushing his teeth.
Okay,
I think
that's
his
Scott.
name's Scott.
Yeah, number 10.
Okay. So first of all, I would take pictures all the time of like people in my kitchen hanging out, and you would have Scott in the background, and it's a full nude, and you can see his dick. It's not hard, but you can see it. Facebook would the robots in Facebook would detect that
Oh
picture in the
god.
background, and they would disable my account.
Oh
And
god.
I had to just because it was in the background. This happened twice where it got disabled, and I had to like agree to all these things before they would enable my account. So just that was interesting because
Yeah.
normally I don't take photographs of nudity and post it on Facebook, and I thought it was interesting that Facebook kind of caught that in the background twice. It was just accidental that we had it there. But anyhow, I would be looking at Scott all the time. And when people would come over for drinks, this is Scott, and it was like the big joke at our place. And so one day, near the end of the summer, I'm getting coffee, and next to me is Scott. He's in real life. He's standing right there.
Did you
So
recognize him?
I totally recognized him. And I'm like, I am trying to explain without sounding like a weirdo that his poster is in my house. And I asked him to please come back. It was right down the street. And he actually came up And so I met him, and I have to tell you, he was more handsome in person than he was in the magazine. He was absolutely so handsome. He was so sweet and nice, and he took a photo with me. We didn't take a photo with him with his poster
With his,
because it was naked, but we took a picture of me, him with the wrestling guys, and
nice.
yeah, so I got to meet him, and it was very funny.
Oh, cool. That's a really funny story. I asked if you recognized him right away, just because looks, or at the time looked very different than in that photo shoot. We did that photo shoot. The concept was this more. I wanted to present the sort of narrative story of a morning routine. So
Yes,
it was the opposite of porn, where he starts out naked and by the end of it he's clothed.
totally.
And so we put him in this like Tom Ford suit and everything, and like I'm like, can you trim your beard and like clean it up? And he's like, ugh, because he was kind of like more hippie-ish, and he's just like, ugh, I don't like this. It was funny.
No, it
Um,
was great, and I love the fact that he started out. I love the story, the story that
yeah,
was told, and I think he told me he was the only one at that point that had an erection in the magazine. He seemed to be very proud of that.
right, because it starts with Morning Wood.
Right, right.
And the real cheeky thing that I kind of forgot about was I was really trying to go like take this like idea of like the progression of porn and reverse it.
Yeah,
So I was like, yeah, let's do like Morning Boner, um, but it's not sexual because it's Morning Wood. And then
right.
just you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you put your clothes on, and that's the end.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful, and I liked it so much. He was the poster I chose for P Town.
Well, one of the things you mentioned made me remember, or made me think of something interesting about the posters, which is that they are printed, because they're enlarged so much. The way I deal with the resolution is by, I use like the halftone, which is the dot pattern, that
Hmm.
offset printing uses, and I just enlarge that halftone, so it's like a lower resolution halftone. But I prefer that than like digital pixelation. And it's just to me it's print language, so I like the idea that the posters are made up of like that halftone dot pattern. But what's interesting about the halftone dot pattern is that if you take a picture close enough, the Facebook, Instagram bots don't detect the image.
What do you mean?
Well, because if you take a picture close up enough where all that it is dots, the bots don't catch it.
Meaning the nudity,
Yeah, they
or
don't see the image in it because they just see a bunch of dots. I
oh,
mean, if you take
interesting.
a picture of the poster pulled back far enough, you don't see the dots and you can clearly see the image. But if you took a close-up shot, it wouldn't notice.
Okay, well, that's good
I've
to
done that,
know.
but in my experience, I've done like a picture of really close-up picture from one of the pages, um, and it just goes completely unnoticed.
So I did know, I'm not familiar with like the printing process, but I did notice that the way the dots are expressed, like they are, it's very different than looking at a magazine, like a
Right.
standard magazine. It looks different.
Well, it's
So
if you were to look at a standard magazine under a magnifying glass, those dots would look.
okay.
It's like, yeah, it's just a lower resolution halftone pattern.
And then the other thing is the paper, like the matte paper is really lovely. What can you tell me about why you would choose that?
Yeah, it's not even matte, it's uncoated, which I really liked aesthetically. It's cheaper, it's raggier. I liked it. I like the idea of this kind of cheap old paper. And it's funny because, in the beginning I was really interested in these like kind of old 60s physique pictorial type of like, um, men with like naked portraits and stuff. And it had that feel. But then as time went on and I became more precious about the photography, I started to be like, oh, like I don't like this. I could, because if you shot on like a matte or gloss, like the lushness of the image is just much better. It comes through much better. But I'm like, no, that's I kind of keep with that kind of old raggy look. So
Yeah.
it's sort of hard because even like with like Patrick's photos, they're like beautiful, and then like we print it and it's like, oh, these photos could look even better if they're printed in gloss or.
I mean, I What I can tell you is I would not be talking to you now if that was a glossy magazine. Like there's something about the look, the feel of it that really connected with me. Like, and I think it's very unique. And I think it is, you know, it's obviously the photography, but I think it is also the paper. There's just something about it that's very unique. And also the fact that there's no narrative, like there's no text.
Yeah.
So is there, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the first couple, or the first three issues, I did. It was like a double-sided poster, meaning that the interior. Nowhere in the interior did you see a full page image. Every single page was like a
Ooh, I haven't
fraction
seen,
of a.
I haven't seen.
And so it was actually a little more conceptual
Yeah.
and like a weirder experience in the book form.
Do you think that magazines are that show nudity like this, do you think they're going to come back or do you think they're gone?
I mean, I think they have come back because when I go to the book fairs, and art book fairs, I see more of it. I see more people kind of taking that approach or being inspired by some of the same things that I was inspired by, or exploring that same kind of thing. So I think I see more of it now.
Like you're seeing, like how are people expressing it? In what way?
Like
Like,
specifically in print, but also I guess online. There are a lot of artists that are responding to sort of the nude presentation and how it's engaged digitally, and they might even like work that back into a printed form. But I feel like it's still explored now.
okay, I guess I'm not going to the right places. I feel like there's a lot of like coffee table books, you know, with
Yeah,
the male nude form and stuff like that. But I mean, I remember we had like the gay bookstore in my neighborhood, and you would go and there would be like all these magazines, and I don't even know where you would go to get those now, and if they have them, um, and you know what the quality is anymore.
yeah,
Because I
yeah.
mean, all that type of content, well, you know, I guess it's a broad collection of content, but some of it is online.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like like the accessibility. What's interesting about digital and online is, as much as I'm fanatical with pinups about like the printed matter and that side to it, I also like lean into the digital. Um, when I started pinups, I think in like 2006 I had the idea to do it, but I didn't actually execute it until 2007 because I was really struggling with, okay, like I have this concept, but how am I actually gonna like make it real? And I reached out to printers to get price quotes and try to figure out, should I do loose newsprint that opens up? That was the original concept. And I just kept hitting walls. I think because I was early 20s, just like sending an email out to a printer, and they're like, what the hell, like this kid wants like, they're dealing with like companies that are buying like paying for huge runs, and
Yeah,
I'm like nothing. So they wouldn't even respond to me, and I finally like got to this point where I'm like, you know what, if I don't just do it myself, it's never going to happen. And I went and used Xerox. But what was interesting is like leading up to that point of like breaking down and just doing Xerox for the first 4 issues, I I to motivate myself, I created a MySpace page or a MySpace account for pinups, just to kind of like get the concept out and and um, and get some images out. And I feel like it kind of grew from that in a way, and I think that it spread online. So I do tap into that resource. I think it's important too. I think it brings it allows me to have more exposure than I ever would have. Like when you
yeah,
think back on like Straight to Hell and publications that were circulated in the 70s, that relied solely on mail circulation and word of mouth. Whereas now, I mean, I have global reach because of the internet.
yeah. Do you feel so when you started this, did you have an intention besides the creative part of it, did you have any other goals that you were striving for, or was it just, I have this idea, I just need to get it out there, and we'll just let it out to the universe and see what
That
happens?
the latter. I had the concept, and it took me a really long time to kind of actually make it happen. And I think the first issue is very much an experiment. And I didn't even plan to do issue two. I was just like, can I make this? Let's try. And I finally did. Um, and I was happy with it. And then from there, I'm like, yeah, I'll do another one right away. So it was a gradual thing. I think if I had told myself like, you're going to make 20 issues over the course of like 10 years, I would be like, no way. Um, that would have been daunting. So it was really like one step at a time, you know. But yeah, originally it was just an experiment in, can I do this?
Well, I'm so glad that you did. So when you look back at the fact that you have these 20 issues, like, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, now I think a lot of things I do are with that in mind, you know, with the thought that there's this sort of 10-year project, and and thinking in that context. But like, for example, the thought of like, well, when am I going to stop doing this? You know, um, I think a lot more in terms of like the larger scale project. Looking in retrospect, it is weird to think back and to look at individual old issues
Mm-hmm.
and think back on them. It's just a collection of like stories, like, oh, you know, when we shot that issue, this happened, or.
Are you someone that kind of that looks back on everything, or are you more focused on what's in the future, what's next in terms of
A
pinups?
bit of both. I mean, I
Yeah.
think when I think about the future of pinups, I think about the context of what it has become and like that progression. But I'm also very much thinking about what that means in the future. So I don't really like look back on like any one individual issue and like
Mm-hmm.
get lost in it as much as maybe it would be fun. I don't even like look through them that much anymore. They're just kind of
Yeah.
some part of my my home, and you know, they're just always around. But yeah, it is interesting to look back. I think I've changed a lot as a creator, and so it is interesting. Actually, speaking of looking back, I because of COVID, you know, and being working from home, I had this moment of like this creative energy, and I was like, oh, I'd love to do another photo shoot or do something new with pinups, but I wasn't able to. So instead, it forced me to re-examine some of the older work and look through older work, and I found some really great images that I discarded long ago for whatever reason, like maybe it didn't fit in the ratio of the page. And so they found new life, and I did a new edition of 3 images from old material. So that was exciting, and I think that it was exciting to create something new that was looking back on old material.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, do you have your next photographer that you're going to be using for your next?
No, I mean, I have someone in mind that I want to reach out to, but I haven't reached out, and because I don't know when it would be appropriate to start that project up again. You
Right.
know, I think we're hopefully going to be out of the woods soon. At least in New York, I think things are feeling a lot safer outside. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Okay. Well, I think
But
you need to do a pinups edition in an abandoned amusement park.
oh, an abandoned amusement park. Do you have any recommendations for those?
We, yeah, we can find one for you.
Yeah.
There's a
I
few.
know now.
There's few of them. There's fewer of them. There was a few of them around.
Actually, that makes me realize I missed an opportunity to do some kind of weird post-apocalyptic looking shoot in empty New York City.
Oh, you're right.
I saw some crazy shots that were taken in like April that are pretty scary.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
It's tough because, you know, New York City, it's so hard to find a location to shoot nudes. It's not
It-
not a photo studio.
yeah. Well, I'm so happy that I got to talk to you.
Yeah, me too.
As I mentioned, I've been a fan, and other than you and I did meet briefly back in like 2009, 2010, when I happened to be in New York during a small little book fair, like right after I discovered the magazine, and I went and we did meet. And so I'm glad that you were able to answer all my questions.
Yeah, yeah, happy to talk about it anytime.
Yeah. And I
And
think I think your magazine is just an example of like pure creativity, like because it's photography, it's clever, it's tactile. There's just so many dimensions to it that it activated my brain and activates my brain. And I just, when I think of you and creating something out of nothing that's so interesting and unique, I just think that's wonderful and amazing. So, I mean,
oh, wow.
that's why
Thank
I
you.
wanted to talk to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love, and probably is why I've stuck with it, is there's this total freedom. It's not there's no commercial, it's not driven by any kind of commercial thought, or like, oh, how can I sell more or get more people interested. It's like, I mean, there's kind of like this sort of selfish element of like, this, I just want to do this, I want to make this, and this is what I'm going to do. And so it's really rewarding to be able to have that freedom in creating, a publication.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely. That makes total sense. No ads, none of
No
that.
ad, even
None of
though
that.
it's inspired by an ad, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So where can people, so your editions are all available on your website? Is that where people
Yeah,
should go?
yep. It's
Which is
pinupsmag.com.
pinupsmag.com. And then is there any place else that people can follow you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, Pinups, I'm on Instagram now with Pinups. I think it's Pinups Magazine is the handle. And
Okay,
also
great.
it's all on the website. You can link
All
to
right,
it.
perfect. And I think you have, don't you have like a bundle right now, or you have like I think last time I went on there, you had some sort of bundle or all the editions or a lot of them
Well, it's not
bundled.
everything. It's just a bundle of what's left, what's still available, because I've sold out of quite a few. So it's a bundle of, I think there's like 12 issues that are still available now.
All
And
right.
it's
So does that include Scott with his Morning Wood?
for now, yeah.
All right. So anyone
Until it
listening to
sells
this, that's a good one.
out.
And how about
Yeah,
the wrestlers?
they're still available. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for talking with me. This was great.
Thank you.